my story begins, as all stories do, a long time ago, when I was 8. And I came tearing home from school when I was 8, and I said, Mom, guess what? Sandra's adopted. Her parents aren't even her parents. And my mom looked at me and said, well, so are you. I said, what? She said, well, you've always known that. Well, maybe, but it didn't really sink in until I was 8, and I came running home from school. And that opened a whole kettle of fish, I guess, and after that, I was constantly asking my mom, what's my story? How did you find me? Why was I adopted? What happened? And so they told me most of the story, that they had lost a daughter that was born in the early 40s, and she was born with Down's syndrome, which my brother and I had no clue about. We knew that she had existed and that she had died. But until we found the sheet of paper, the death notice in my mother's papers, saying that she had mongoloid idiocy, we had no idea that she was a Down's baby and that she had died. Mom just said that she wouldn't feed, which is pretty common, I gather, with Down's babies, and particularly back at that time. So they were looking for a baby, a girl, healthy, good temperament. My daughter said it was like getting a puppy. You know, you want to look around and get the right one, healthy, good temperament. Exactly what you're looking for, right? So they called up the Children's Aid in Belleville, which is where they were living at the time, and they had already gone through all the pre-screening and the house visits and all the rest of that. And they were looking for this baby. My mom had an opportunity of work. So my dad, this being in the late 40s, early 50s, my dad called the Children's Aid Society and said, do you have a baby? Because my wife was thinking of going back to work, and she won't go to work if we get a baby. And they said, well, we just happen to have one. And if you're interested, you can come down and we'll bring her over and you can have a look at her and see what you think. More puppy. Exactly, just like shopping. So they went down and they checked me out, and there I was at 4.5 months, and I was a serious little thing, apparently. Anyway, I had a big smile for my dad, and they said, oh, she doesn't smile very often, so that's a really good sign she smiled for you. So my dad was, oh my God, little blonde, blue-eyed baby. They thought it was wonderful. So just to backtrack a minute here. So I was 4.5 months old. I was given up for adoption at the end of September when I was a month and a half. So my sisters and I were talking about it and saying, well, why do you think you weren't put up for adoption right away? I mean, you were available, all the papers were signed, everything was good. Well, do you want to guess? They were waiting to see if I would darken up from my Indian heritage. That was pretty common, I guess, back then. But I didn't. I stayed blonde, blue-eyed. And so there were several interviews, I guess, with my dad, and I got some information and so on, and found out that my dad was told that I had a slight Indian heritage. And my sister was incensed when she heard that because I'm at least 50%. But anyway, I don't believe he told my mom, because the paperwork didn't say Mr. and Mrs. Raymond, it just said Mr. Raymond, and he did most of that kind of thing. And I think that partially for the concern around racism, partly also within our own family, that he probably thought that it was the best idea that she didn't know that I was just a very healthy little baby girl, and that's what they wanted, and they were very happy with that. But kind of makes you wonder if things would have been different. My grandmother was very Victorian. Very, very Victorian. She was the only grandparent that I had. And it took her a while to warm up to me, but she eventually did, and we had a very good relationship. But she was the kind of mom. My uncle was very serious about a young lady, and he never married. But he was very serious about this young lady, but she was Roman Catholic. So there was no way. So I think it was probably the best idea not to say anything, just let things go the way they were. Anyway, I went through my years growing up always looking for somebody that looked like me. I mean, you always do that sort of thing. I didn't find anybody that looked like me until I had my own kids, but you always look. But you know what? I was checking out all the white women. Silly me. That's my mom, about the age, that's 1950, so she would have been only a few months after she had me when that picture was taken. Anyway, little did I know that she, after she gave me up, wandered the streets of Belleville checking carriages to see if she could see me. And she never did, but we didn't live that far away. It was just a few blocks away from where she was. My dad was a Mason, and some of my relatives were also Masons, so they probably went to the same meetings and knew each other, so it's a small world. Anyway, that was the beginning. What's next? There's my mom, birth mother, a little older. Apparently I look like her and sound like her. We'll get to that one. Well, I'll leave that up. Actually, this is just kind of interesting because as I was growing up, I'm very much the kind of person that likes to win. So when we played Cowboys and Indians, I always made sure I was a cowboy. And I moved up to the north, and prior to that, this was my only, it was about the only boat I was ever in. So people living uphill appreciate that. Until I met my husband, I don't think I was ever in a boat, other than that one, which was kind of cute. Anyway, moving along, July 1996. And you'll see throughout my life there are signs. Things happen, and I believe in signs. And things happen, and you wonder, is it a coincidence or is it more than a coincidence? And the more you know and the more you understand and the more you are immersed in your culture and your heritage, the more you believe that it isn't a coincidence. There are signs. You don't see them most of the time because you aren't attuned to that kind of thing. I know I wasn't. I am a little bit better now, but not a whole lot probably. Anyway, in July 1996, I put my name on the adoption registry. Maybe it's a coincidence, maybe not, but that was the year that my birth mother passed away. I put my name on the registry in July, and she passed in August. Oh, and I have to tell you, I meant to tell you when I started this, that today is my birth mother's birthday. How is that for wonderful, eh? So the ancestors are with me indeed. In August 2004, I asked for my non-identifying information from Belleville. Both of my parents were gone at that time, so I thought it was time for me to move forward. I was getting older. I was thinking, if I don't find them soon, or at least look, they're going to be gone. And I'll never know if I have a family or if I have anything. And 2008, 4 years later, my name finally came to the top of the list. There's a big backlog of people wanting, at that time, their non-identifying information. And I got a phone call from Children's Aid, a very nice lady, Children's Aid in Belleville. And she said, normally we don't call people, but I didn't know if you might be aware that you have some Native heritage, that you're First Nations. And I had no idea. This was totally new to me. And she talked to me for a little while, and she said, I just want to make sure that you're okay with it before we send out any information, and if you needed to talk about it or if this is a problem for you. Meanwhile, I was going, wow, I wonder what kind of Indians live around there. I've got Indian blood. Isn't that fantastic? Oh, it's so cool. So I thought it was great. And I got my non-identifying information finally, and within that, most of it was blanked out. It looked like a letter that you would get during the war. There was just black lines through virtually everything. However, my father's name was listed, and this is the only place where I have a father's name, because my father's name was not listed on my birth certificate. But his name was listed in this, so I know his name was Art Brooks, and I've since found out that he is Arthur Ernest Brooks, and he was a sign painter, and he was married to someone that lived on the reserve, which would partially explain perhaps why I was put up for adoption. It was interesting. I have up here, and you can see it when you come up if you want to later, my birth certificate, my original birth certificate, because once I had my treaty card, then, and I was able to get this information as well, my original birth certificate. And it's only interesting because they asked her to print her name, and her name was Catherine Brandt, and they said, they crossed it out, and they said, no, 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 we want your maiden name. And she said, that is my maiden name, it's Catherine Brandt. She married a Brandt too, but not her cousin. Anyway, the other thing in here that they wrote in, the racial origin Indian, and then they wrote non-treaty, which was a total lie because she was treaty. But we don't know why they did that sort of thing, maybe to make me less Indian, made easier to adopt, I don't know. Makes you kind of wonder though, because there were a lot of errors in the paperwork that we got, names spelled incorrectly and so on. But my sisters insist that my name should have been spelled C-A-V-E-L-L, and it was spelled C-E-V-A-L-L, so Kevel instead of Cavell, because people at that time were being named after Elizabeth Cavell, who was a World War I nurse, very well known, and the hospital in Belleville was named after her. And there were a lot of babies that were named that at the time, but I wasn't. So that's interesting. Whether it was an error on somebody's part or not, we'll never know. Anyway, she suggested, that the CAS worker suggested I get in touch with Indian Affairs and find out if I would be able to get a status card. And I did put my name in there, and I got a note back saying that it would take 18 months to 2 years before my name would come to the top of the list in that. Bearing in mind it was 2008, I finally got my status card in 2012, not until after I had given them the balance of the information about my family. So I don't know when my name would have come up, if ever, but so once I had that, I thought, well, I want to know more about who I am. Okay, I have Indian blood. I don't know how much. I want to know more about my family. So armed with my blacked out non-identifying information, I made a phone call to the band office for the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte. And I spoke to a girl at the band office and said, I'm looking for somebody named Brandt. And she said, oh, well, that's like Smith. She said, they're everywhere. You know, that's a very, very common name down here. And I said, well, I know that he died in April of 1948. So how many do you have that died on that particular date whose name was Brandt? Well, there was only one, and his name was Leslie Brandt. And I said, do you have his wife's name? And they said, yes, it's Catherine. But we don't have any other information on her. We don't have a status number for her. We don't have anything on her right now. Your best bet would be to talk to our librarian, because our librarian is also the genealogist for the band. And you can call her. She isn't in today. She'll be in on Thursday if you want to call her back. I said thank you very much, and I got off the phone. And I never did call, because I kind of figured I had all the information that I was going to get. What was this woman going to tell me that I hadn't already got from this other woman? If I had called, I would have been talking to my sister. And it would have been a couple of years earlier that I would have met her. So I guess it wasn't time. We do a lot of that. If it's not meant to be, then it isn't the right time, and when the right time is there, it will happen. And anyway, I also put my name on the National Adoption Registry again, made sure it was there, and I got on with my life. And in 2009, the next summer, I turned 60 and I got a kayak for my birthday, and I thought, well, this is really cool. Anyway, we got it prior to my birthday. So that summer in August, I'm not sure really what the date was, whether it was a long weekend or the following weekend, but I went out with my son, and the one and only time I went out in my kayak. I know, I'll get there, but anyway, so far it's the one and only time I went out with my kayak, and I was going along, and there on the top of the water was a beautiful eagle feather, and it's a flight feather, which I think is special too. And I picked it up and I kept it, thinking to myself all along, I'm not supposed to have this. It's illegal to have this. I'll just hide it. I won't tell anybody I've got it. Eventually, when I did know it was okay to have it, I beaded it and made it beautiful. But it's been mine from the time I picked it up off the water in 2009. In 2009, down in Tyndonega, there was a family reunion happening. And at that family reunion were my sisters and cousins and all kinds of people. And I don't know half of those people still. But that was then. Maybe they're just older. I know some of them. And my family as well was there at the family reunion. And my sisters were looking around saying, isn't this wonderful? Everybody's here. It's just, oh, we've got this reunion happening and it's just wonderful. And my older sister kind of looked around and she thought, and she had this secret that she'd been carrying for a very long time because she knew about me. She knew about me right from when she was 2 and I arrived and was given up. And she kept our mother's secret. And our mother passed in 1996, and she still kept the secret. But in 2009, at that reunion, she thought, enough. That's my older sister in the black. That one's mine. Sorry, people. And she called to me, she got in touch with, spoke to my other 2 sisters and said, you know, it would be nice if we were all here, but we're not. We have another sister, and she was put up for adoption. And I think it's time you knew. So my sister Callie, being a lot like me in a lot of ways, immediately got on the adoption registry. Within a week, she had her name on the adoption registry. And June 2010, so less than a year, I get a phone call. I'd gone to the post office and I'd picked up mail, and there was a registered letter in the mail, and I just put it on my seat and forgot about it. I mean, what, do you get good news from registered mail? Not always, do you? Anyway, I figured, oh, I'll get to that later. So that evening I get a phone call, and it's that quintessential phone call that you hear about, right? Hi, don't know how to tell you this, but I'm your sister. And it was, wow. And we started talking, and our spouses and our kids, and she said, you're Mohawk and you're Turtle Clan. And I'm thinking, okay, so what does that mean? Because I didn't know anything really. And I've since found out a lot, and I'm learning a lot more. My husband was reading something, and he looked up from his book and listened for a minute. Light went on, back down reading his book again. And we talked for about an hour. She told me about our older sister and her kids and her grandkids and her own 2 kids, and it was absolutely wonderful. And I was busily writing things down, and you just never expect that call, and you get it. And I was just wired. I was just this high off the ground. I got off the phone and I thought, I got to go for a walk. Chuck, dog, let's go for a walk. We go out our door, down the stairs, to the edge of the road, and what is there walking along the edge of the road but a turtle? Another sign? Kind of think so. My younger sister Callie was saying later, I thought we'd get a sign from our mom saying that she was happy and okay with what we're doing here and that it was good. And the others looked at her and said, we did. Beth got the sign. Right, the turtle. Turtles come there, I guess, to nest. I had never seen one. I knew that they were there, but I had never seen a turtle in that area until that day. I don't think it was just a casual thing. There is my great-grandparents' 50th anniversary, 1919, so my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother, and a whole bunch of people. The little ones would be my aunts. The one with the bow I know was Aunt Helen in the front here with a big bow in her hair. And I know that there were 1919. No. Yes, they would have been there. My mother wasn't in that picture because she wasn't born until 1924. So, but a lot of them were. And there was the gravestone there for my grandparents. And that's a picture of my grandparents and all the kids, all my aunts and uncles, of which, well, they're all gone. The one on the far side is my mother. And that's their 50th anniversary. And in 3 years, it'll be my 50th anniversary, should we live so long, God willing. And I'll have to get my picture up there, too, with all the family there. I think that would be kind of cool. So the great-grandparents were, I don't know, can I go back? Probably not. David Joe Brandt, 1850 to 1921, and Catherine Loft, 1851 to 1930. Somebody apparently really wants me. That's too bad. The grandparents are Herbert D.J. Brandt, 1877 to 1958, and his wife, Alicia Margaret Blanchard, 1882 to 1952. So she only lived a couple of years after the 50th anniversary. Once I had met my sister and we talked on the phone, the other sisters kind of discussed it and they all got together and they decided that they didn't really want to visit on the phone. They wanted to see me. They didn't want to have any more talk, though they did send me pictures. They didn't want any more talk until we actually met each other. And so I'm a very instant gratification kind of girl. If anybody knows me, you probably kind of know that already. And that was middle of June. So I talked to people at work who were just thrilled with all my news, and I got some time off, and in the July long weekend, we flew down to Toronto and rented a car because we didn't know what we were going to find when we got there. We wanted our getaway if we needed it. As it turned out, we parked the car and we didn't get in it again until we left, which was really quite wonderful. But you never know these things. And I was so nervous about meeting them. We talked about it and I was just on pins and needles. Are they going to like me? Are they not going to like me? You know, I'm so white. I'm not going to blend. I still don't blend. As it turned out, it didn't really matter. We drove up and the first thing I heard was gales of laughter coming from the house. And my sisters are known for their laughter. You walk into a room and you know within a few minutes that they're there because you can hear them and you can hear the laughter. And we drove in. I'm not much of a laugher myself, but apparently I'm getting better at it when I'm with them at least. And we drove in, I got out and I heard this, and Callie's boyfriend was having a cigarette in the garage and he looked at me and said, oh, hi, and we met, and he said, just go in like you own the place. I thought, oh, I can do that. So I walked up and I opened the door and I walked in and I shouted, so where's the welcoming committee? And there was just shrieks and laughter and shouting and everybody coming through the door at the same time and pushing my older sister to the front, so I met her first and then met my other two sisters, and the grandkids were there, and the house was full. It was just all kinds of people were there, and it was really, really wonderful. And so we got together, and I had my computer with me with pictures and my kid pictures, and we talked and we ate and we visited, and that evening was just for us, and it was really wonderful. They were saying that I need to get my treaty card. It's my right. I felt it was a privilege for me because I only just found out about it, and I just thought the whole thing was quite wonderful. Anyway, I did send in everything, and as I said, I got it a couple of years later. We talked and talked and talked, and they took me for a drive around the res, and I think the ancestors were still there, still checking us out, because this big fellow was in the middle of the road and we had to stop and wait for somebody to come and move it. So you folks know how you move a snapper? You pick him up by the tail. So his front feet are down, his tail is up, and then you just can pull him off. He can't get you. Maybe you let go kind of quickly, I think. Anyway, some guys came along and we let them show us how that was done. We didn't try that ourselves. He was heavy. He was a big, massive, big turtle with all kinds of moss on his back, or her back. It was really quite wonderful. So I figured that there was another sign for me, in case I was too dense to get all the ones that had come before. This lady is Audrey. She knew my mom. She was one of her best friends. So I finally had somebody from that generation that I could connect with. And the four of us went and talked with her and met with her. I did see her again later. She has since passed, but I did get a chance to talk to her a couple of times, and it was really wonderful. She remembered my father, my birth father. She said she remembered seeing him walking by on the road right in front of her house, which was close to the road, heading up to the farm where my mom was. And she said he was fairly small build, and he had blonde hair that he wore in a ponytail. So that's all I know about how he looked, because that's what she told me. So this is what it was like about 1946. It's my mother on the far side there, and the servicemen. And the girls would get together from the reserve, and they'd go to Trenton to meet with the service guys, and they'd dance and they'd carry on for the whole night. Well, not carry on. Back in the 40s type carrying on, okay? They danced and they had a good time, and as Audrey said, there was a different guy every weekend. She said, not your father though, because that wasn't just every weekend. She saw him fairly often. Okay. And there's Kay with Les, her husband. He had a Medal of Valor that he from the war. He lost an arm, he lost an eye, and he was filled with shrapnel. They married. They had my sister in 1947 in September, and he passed in April 1948. There's the four of us. That was when we first met. When I went down there, we took that picture. We'll get to him. You start talking and you start thinking to yourself, okay, so I was born in August, so when would I have been conceived? And you count back, and you come up with Remembrance Day. And Remembrance Day on the reserve, especially at that time, was a very big deal. And whether it's true or not, I think it was probably very close, because her husband had died in April. This was the first Remembrance Day after that. He was a decorated soldier. He had certainly given to his country as much as you can give. And I think that she was probably feeling it, and that he was a warm body and a shoulder, and somebody that she cared about. And that's okay with me. I think that that was a good thing. After seeing Audrey, we came back out from her place and got back in the car, and Karen, my older sister, leaned over the seat and handed me a little box that contained a pair of earrings. And there was a palpable feeling of relief throughout the car, because she's the oldest. It's a matriarchal society, if you like, and she's it. And before there'd be any acceptance anywhere, there would be acceptance from my sister Karen. And there was, and for that I'm eternally grateful. She made me feel very welcome. The next day, I got a family ring, which I'm wearing. That was my mother's, that I got from Jan, because she said, well, now you have all of us. So I've got the 3 girls on there. The other ring I'm wearing is from my adoptive mother, and that was her family ring, of which I am part. So I have them all with me today. So we went driving around after that. It was starting to get dusk. Now for this story. So it's dusk, and we're driving along in a van, and we're giggling and laughing and talking, and my middle sister Jan is doing the driving. And we're going along the road, and all of a sudden she comes to a stop. Because there, in the middle of the road, waiting for us to stop because it isn't going to move, is a blue heron. And it's just standing there, and it's watching us. And we stop, and we wait, and we wait. And the sisters are kind of looking around, and they're looking at me, and they're saying, guess the ancestors are checking you out, eh? I'm thinking, oh boy. I say, am I supposed to get out? Like, I don't know, I'm new at this, okay? And they kind of laughed, but we waited, and it was a good 30 seconds that that thing sat in the middle of the road and watched. If that's not a sign, I don't know what is. It flew from there up to a hydro wire, and it sat on the hydro wire, and we left, and it watched us leave and watched us go down the road. And if that's not a sign, I don't know what is. While I was there, we had a party, and this was down on my sister's property is considered the farm, and it's been in the family for many generations. And it goes right down onto the Bay of Quinte, and there's a beach there and so on. And that old shack there is one that they used to rent out years ago, but it's just kind of dilapidated and falling apart now. But it's a great place to have a party, so everybody brought everything, and it was just kind of all kinds of wonderful. And as you can see, I did learn to laugh while I was there. It was really a really good time. And it was meeting cousins that I, couldn't remember the names of for a long time, and other relatives. This is my brother-in-law, Lorne, and Chuck. And Chuck found his brother-in-law, and he found a friend, and he found somebody that likes to go motorcycling with him, and so we all gained. Chuck bought into this, if you like to say it that way, with everything that you could possibly do. He was more than supportive. He was and has continued to be just my rock in all things Indian. And there he is there. They're heading out on the bikes, and they went down to bike rallies, and they just had a really, really good time together. We took more pictures when I was down there with cousins, the 4 of us and the cousins. I'm only 5'4" and a bit, and I don't know if I've shrank, but I'm the tallest of the 4 of us. And I saw pictures of our mother and Callie's wedding, and it looked like she was even shorter, so I don't know. These are my sister's houses at the time. That's my sister Jan's place, my sister Callie's place, and that was my sister Karen's house, which they have since torn down and built a new one. And I'm sorry, Karen, if you're watching this, but I don't have a picture of your new house, which is really too bad. Her son built her a house. They tore this down and poured it all into the basement hole and covered it up, and it's a lovely little home, one of those ones that are done on a pad, and it's the heat is in the floor, and it's just absolutely lovely little home. January 2011, I figured, well, I guess I better go down and visit. So I went down for my Indian immersion. I went for 6 weeks and stayed with my younger sister, Callie. And this was a ceremony at the Longhouse, which I attended, and I had been gifted with a ribbon shirt that I wore for that. In August of 2010, Karen and Lauren came to visit us, see my house. So I'd been there, they came. Her birthday is in September and mine's in August. So we had our birthdays together, first time ever. Pretty nice. There's me with my flag. And there's the ancestors, still looking over me. I figure it is, because good grief, they don't normally do things like that. And he stood there long enough for me to get a really good picture of him. We're still doing things together. That was a paint party in September that we went to. Pictures were awful. Mine was just unbelievable, but it was a really good time. If you've ever gone to one of those parties, it's a good time. And there's my family. That's my brother and my 3 sisters and me. My sister Karen had been out a few times. Callie had come out and visited me. She also went down to Arizona and visited me down there, which was great. We went to the hoop dancing competition, and it was quite wonderful. My sister Jan wasn't able to get away, and she didn't come until this year. So this year, all 4 of us were in my house together, and it was wonderful. Chuck found things to do elsewhere, and we just spent a lot of time getting together. I've embraced my beading, my culture, my heritage. I learned to bead with a foster daughter from Lac Seul, and in the 70s. And I always felt kind of guilty about doing it because it wasn't me, and it is now, so it's wonderful. I have a few things up here that I've beaded. And that's only interesting, well, they're cute. They were for my foster grandkids. But I figured for my foster grandkids that their grandma, which is me, is Mohawk. But I've been living in Anishinaabe territory for a very long time. And my first beading that I ever did was a Ojibwe beading. So I did a combination of the flat beading, the Ojibwe beading, and the raised beading that is my culture. And I did that for both of them. And I'm proud to be Mohawk, proud to be Turtle Clan. I'm proud of my sisters. They're wonderful. Karen, my older sister, established the library on the reserve. She figured they needed one, and she started in a little rickety house. I think she might have started somewhere prior to that, but when I saw it, it was in a little tiny house, and it had an upstairs and downstairs, and it flooded regularly. And they had some computers, and they had books just jam-packed everywhere. And she didn't want to retire until she had finished what she wanted to do, and part of what she wanted to do was get the library into a larger building. And now it is in a beautiful, big building with lots of windows, and it's bright, and there's lots of books, and there's computers, and there's conference rooms, and there's display cases with antique beading and so on in it, and they do all kinds of different things at it's a hub, and it's all because of her that was done. That was really special. My middle sister Jan is the first director of Indigenous Initiatives at Queen's University, and that's big, and that came out of the What in Reconciliation? Yeah, that, sorry. Truth and Reconciliation Commission, yeah, lost that for a second. And she is wonderful. She just knows so much. She's also a clan mother. She, being the clan mother, chose my name. My name means long clay. And I was thinking, you know, why couldn't I get a cute name like other people get, you know? She who flies with butterflies or something, or whatever, you know, what do I get? Long clay. But apparently, I'm very proud of it. It is a very old name, and it has to do with the earth and the clay, and you mold with clay, and it's solid, and you're grounded, and it is a very special name, and I thank you, Jan, though I never can say it correctly according to Callie. But there you go. Pretty sad when you can't say your own name. But you know, when I was adopted and my name was Lynn Keval Brandt, it's C-E-V-A-L-L, and I didn't have a clue how you said that either. It was Saval for a long time. Found out later it was Keval. Go figure. My youngest sister, Callie, is the executive director of the Learning Center for Educational Programming around Language and Cultural Revitalization. I asked her what it was and she gave it to me in Mohawk, and I get back to her and said, seriously, you know I can't even say my name, come on now. So she sent me this, which is basically a translation. She got her master's at the University of Victoria in Indigenous Languages 2 years ago, I guess. So they are all doing really, really well, and I'm proud of all of them. We have a lot in common. Mannerisms, the kids found them really freaky, my kids and her kids, and they see us together, and we do we have the same gestures, we have the same mannerisms, we're very alike. Everybody thought it was kind of creepy. Especially with Karen, we both read tarot cards, we're both into motorcycles, we both got a kayak for our 60th birthday, and we've both only been in them once. Go figure. We both have houses that were picked up and moved to a new location. That's the one that was the older house, had been moved there. There were a lot of things. Apparently I sound a bit like my mother and I look a bit like my mother, and that can rub Jan the wrong way because there was a lot of angst there when she was growing up. And too much of looking and sounding, and I have to say, whoa, 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 I'm your sister, not your mom, it's okay. It's hard enough because I say the wrong things a lot of times, and things can get out of hand. Do you have questions, or did I cover everything? You wanted, oh, I know what else I wanted to do. Hang on, I got one more thing here. Don't turn that off yet. When I was going through the internet, I was looking at various things, and I'm always into, they teach you to do something and then you try it yourself and see what you come up with. And one of the exercises that I found on the internet to get to know yourself better is a poem called I Am From. And I don't know if you folks are familiar with it or not. You can look it up. And there is one that they give you, and then you're to write your own. So, I am from Lynn Kevel and Beth Colleen and Gondares. I am from cowboys and Indians in the backyard, ringer washers and clotheslines all year long, and push mowers, bike riding, hide and seek at dusk. I am from fenced and hedged backyards, peonies in June. Nancy was her name, the baby whose place I took. I am from secretly raiding my brother's library, novels, classics, poetry well beyond my years. And from car sick, open windows and long train trips, open spaces between the cars and leaning into the wind. I am from knitting with Nana, mitts, gloves, and socks, and diabetic reactions, manic laughter, and sugary orange juice. Dad doesn't mean what he says when he's like that, but I think maybe. And I am from blood will out, and you can do better. And from boyfriends, fast cars, and showing off. Teen parties, slow dancing, and kisses in the dark. I am from adopted and different, looking and finding, Callie, Jan, and Karen, sisters, clan, and family like me. Ancestors and family trees bound together in black and white photos, basement slideshows, and flickering movies. I am from memories lost and found in the dark, shadows of my people, old and new. Thank you. Questions?